Boom, recording is now started. So hello everyone. My name is, those who don't know me, my name is Jervis Johnson Gervais, but I go by Jay. And welcome everyone. If this is your first time at the San Francisco Enterprise Agile Community and Meetup, welcome. We focus on basically agile stuff for big companies and large enterprises. And there's generally more complexity that you have to deal with larger organizations and how you have to implement agile and do agile transformation. And that's generally what we try to focus on in our community. We've had a lot of great speakers, and we have a lot of great knowledge sharing and information over the last 3.5, 4 years that we've been doing this, and tonight is no exception with Todd Lankford. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleague and wonderful friend Ron Lichty, who's going to introduce Todd, and then we're going to go forth. Ron, it's you.
Great, Jay. So I'll let all of you know that I heard Todd give the presentation you're about to hear at a Retrium-sponsored event just a few weeks ago. I've long been an advocate for transparency and visibility, as probably most of us in the Agile community are. But I'd also just published a blog post, the first line of which is never, ever, ever let velocity be used as a metric for performance or productivity. And so I have a certain cautionary feeling about certain things being visible and certain things being transparent. And in that blog post, I quoted a colleague who said that his best practice is to prevent points and velocity from being leaked outside of the team. And I thought that was an interesting way to phrase it. And so Todd's presentation for Retrium a month ago totally resonated with me. It's a combination of visibility and transparency, and some dangers around visibility and transparency. And I thought we have to bring this to our community. So I'm going to mostly let Todd introduce himself, but he is a well-heeled Agile speaker, Agilist, Agile coach, and I'll let you take it from there, Todd.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah. So I've been doing this a while, pretty much since I formed my company in 2009. I've been doing Agile coaching, lean coaching, into product strategy type stuff lately. So kind of all over the Agile and lean space. I do a lot of large company transformations. I also write a lot, kind of like Ron. I have my blog. I'm an editor and writer for Serious Scrum on the Medium platform. So some of you may have seen me there, but yeah, I do a lot of that. That's kind of my side hustle, if you will. I love kind of finding interesting topics to talk about, and the one we're going to talk about tonight is definitely cool. I got a lot of enjoyment when I found this study. So I'm excited to share it with you guys. You want to dig right in, or what do you want to do, Ron?
Go for it.
Okay. So
well, the floor is all yours.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I've got a mural up here. I promise to keep it lightweight. I know it's end of the day and we probably are doing this kind of stuff all day long. So, but what I'd like to do is give you a presentation where you can just sit back and listen and hear about the research and how I see it can be applied to an Agile journey. And then after that, we'll have some questions and answers, just to kind of get the juices flowing. And then I'd like to go into breakouts to have maybe smaller group discussion about how we can apply this to the places we work today. Come back, share some of that out to the larger group, have some discussion, and then we'll close it out. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the presentation. All right. Hold on. All right, so this actually started with a blog post. So if, if you happen to go out to my blog, you will see something similarly titled, which could be an interesting read after we get through this. When I work with companies and I get into the organization, I seriously hear these statements all the time. Some version of these I hear quite a bit. And I'll hear things like, you know, we need to get everything in Jira or Azure DevOps so that we can have, you know, everything transparent about what the teams are doing. I hear things like, what's your burn down look like this sprint? And just wanting to know kind of what the team's doing. Hey, I see your velocity is trending flat or down. What's going on? You should fix that. I mean, literally, I hear this, some form of it all the time. And a lot of it is really driven from a desire to have that control. Sometimes you lose it when you go into an agile journey, if you're moving from a command and control structure. But the transparency that agile really wants is so that you can find problems early. So the team can find problems early, so they can fix them fast and cheaply. And if they can't, you know, knowing about them is good because then they can ask for help. So that's really what transparency is about. But the misconceptions that drive a lot of the desire for management to have visibility is they want to improve team performance, and they want to kind of increase operational control, and they want to share learning. But in fact, this doesn't really happen. These are some misconceptions, I think. I've always felt this, that it doesn't actually do these things. So a lot of times what management feels is if we have more transparency, then we're actually going to see an increase in performance. And this actually stems from a long-held belief that it really started around this study that was done in the 30s. And the Hawthorne effect, they basically went into this company called Hawthorne Works, and they saw that when they turned up lights, people actually chose to act differently, and they acted differently in a way that made it appear like their performance was better. They basically acted differently. So a lot of people actually have taken on to this and say, you know, we should be more transparent. Extreme transparency will give higher performance. And so a lot of people just feel this, right? And it's the common belief. But I definitely see the opposite. I see when this full transparency happens, you actually have a lot of hiding. You find that experimentation goes down because you're being watched, and you better not go outside the lines, especially if you're coming from an environment that has a lot of command and control, or that may not have a lot of psychological safety, where there might be fear involved. When you feel like everything's wide open, if you're coming from that environment where you have to follow the rules, it does this stuff. And a lot of the companies I work with are coming from that space. So you end up with a lot of waste and productivity loss instead of a performance increase. So this is where the study comes in. So I've always wondered if there is an actual study on this, and I ran across this about 2 or 3 months ago, and I found it just very compelling and very interesting how it parallels what I see. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So this actually originated by Ethan S. Bernstein of Harvard, and he decided to conduct a field experiment in 2012. And he understood as well that the popular belief was that transparency increases productivity, and most companies just default to this. And at the time, they were kind of in this big movement to have open, transparent office design, just in this big movement just to have full transparency about everything going on. So he knew this was the popular belief, but he knew there wasn't a lot of studies out there that kind of looked to see if this is really true. There was the Hawthorne study way back when, but there's not a lot of recent data. And so he went out with a goal of saying, how does transparency really affect productivity in the real world? And he actually ended up choosing a location for this as a mobile phone factory in China. He chose the second largest. Now he focused in on mobile phone factories because they're very well known for having a very open, transparent design. And he focused on Precision Mobile. Now this is a pseudonym. That's not the real name. This is what he used in the study. He doesn't give the real name. He's just protecting the innocent. But he calls them Precision Mobile. He chose them particularly for their transparent design. They have football field length visibility throughout the entire plant. And they have a catwalk that goes around the perimeter. You can go up on this catwalk and you can just see every line completely. Everything's open. You can see all the work going on, full visibility. He also, one other interesting thing about the transparent design was the uniforms. So the workers on the line had a certain uniform, but all of the managers and leaders for the lines actually had a different uniform. And one particular thing they had was brightly colored hats. And this is interesting. We're going to come back to this, but this created a form of two-way transparency where the workers could also see the managers. He also chose Precision Mobile because, and mobile phones in general because it's a very competitive environment. Highly competitive, razor-thin margins. They had fine-tuned standard operating procedures because they had to always meet their metrics, meet their targets, high quality, so that they could remain competitive. So he wanted to have a very competitive environment for the study. Okay, so there's two phases. We're gonna walk through them both. So the first phase, he embedded researchers as line workers on one of the lines inside the plant. And he recruited these people from the local area. He sent them through the same onboarding program that anybody would go through so that everybody would just think they're a normal worker. He did not want any behavior to be influenced by people knowing that they were in a study. So it was completely secret. So he had this interesting finding. So as soon as these workers got embedded on the line, the existing workers that were already on the line pulled them into the system. And he noticed something he called the reverse Hawthorne effect. Let me tell you what this means. So there was a secret code of conduct that the workers on the line educated the new workers on to say, you know what, when things come down the line, they're not always the way management thinks they are. And the standards don't always work. And so we have ways of kind of working around the standards that keep the line flowing. And they trained up the new people on these ways of working. But they said, when management comes around, you can't let them know you're doing it different. It has to be what is the standard. So this reverse Hawthorne effect, what would happen when the managers came around, they would actually go back to a less effective way of working so that they would not get in trouble and not be confronted for not working within the standard. So the transparency was actually not increasing productivity, it was decreasing productivity because of the hiding behavior. And the brightly colored hats of the managers created an early warning system. And they had this down pat. Somebody would see the brightly colored hat because of the full open plant design. They could see, okay, here comes the manager, and they would whisper down the line and everybody would go back to working in the standard way. They would drop any of the tweaks they were making to keep the line flowing, and go back to the standard. And interestingly enough, he said, if you stood on the catwalk, you could see a manager come to a line and you could instantly see the line productivity go down. You could visibly see it as they went back to the standard way of working. So that was the first phase of the study. Here's one quote that one of the operators said, everyone's happy. Management sees what they want to see, and we meet our production quality and quantity targets. So hear no evil, say no evil, see no evil, classic. Phase 2 of the study, he installed curtains around the line for 5 months. Now, this was not an abnormal occurrence. They would typically do this if they were doing work near a line in the plant. They would put curtains around the line so that you would not have any contamination and no disturbance of a line while work is going on nearby. So nothing was out of the ordinary for this to happen. And this curtain was complete. It completely enveloped the entire line. Couldn't see inside of it. Couldn't see what was going on. And there were 3 findings. The first finding was that privacy actually improved performance, and quite fast. Within the first week, and their main metric here, and this is the one that they were all judged by, was how many defect-free units per hour they could produce. And they immediately, the first week of this, they had a 10 to 15% increase in this metric. And not only that, for the entire 5 months, they beat every other line, all 28 lines for the whole 5 months, completely obliterated every one of them in performance, this main performance metric. When he talked to the operators and after the study, and he also had researchers embedded inside of this curtain, they said the performance was increasing because of 3 things. One, it permitted tweaks. So if something was wrong with the line, something abnormal was happening, they could actually tweak it without anybody coming around to figure out what was going on and getting in their way. And so they could actually tweak for these temporary issues without having to alarm anybody. And because that would typically slow them down. When they knew how to fix it, they could just do it themselves. So that was one thing. They also were able to incubate new ideas. They were able to try some new things out, see if they worked, without having to have managers see them trying something new or risk that, or even having to hide any of that from management. But allow them to kind of see if the ideas would work, and then they could take them to management, once they had an idea that was working and get approval for it. But it allowed that incubation period to happen. It also avoided the value-reducing hiding activity they were performing. They no longer had to worry about being caught by management. They could still see if management came in. They could see the curtains moving and things like that. So they still had a warning system, but it was much less than before. Managers also didn't come in to the curtain, just to kind of see what was going on. It was much more of a private space for the team. Okay, finding number 2, privacy actually increased teamwork for the line that's inside the curtain. They found that when they had the curtain around the team, it actually increased the transparency inside of the curtain. They were more open with each other. They were sharing how they worked. They would cross-train and learn from each other. And because of that, they actually were able to help each other out. And they formed this "how can I help" attitude. And that really helped the line flow better. And they had the privacy to do that. If they were doing that before, they would be pretty noisy and loud. And management would come around and actually shut that down, say, "Quit talking, you're not working." But inside the curtain, they had the privacy to do that. There's actually some comments that it's actually pretty noisy inside that curtain. It sounds like a party, but for some reason it wasn't stopped because of the curtain. Finding number 3, the privacy created a healthy kind of curiosity. And what I mean by that is, well, number 1, the line wanted to kind of project how well it was doing. And they put a whiteboard outside of the curtain, and on it they would keep their metric up to date, so they could show off and maybe kind of flaunt to the other lines how well they were doing, and also just to inform management, what was going on. And because that metric was there, what happened was management no longer was trying to figure out, why are you guys not following the standard? They were curious, what are you doing? It's so awesome. I mean, look at your performance. So when managers would come in the curtain, they would actually be very curious about, what are you guys doing differently? The other lines would actually come in to the curtain and try to figure out what the secret sauce is, so they could learn and they could apply that to their line. So it created this really healthy curiosity that was not there before. And the other thing that was there before was more of an unhealthy curiosity, like what are you not doing that's not within the, what are you doing that's not within the standard, was the curiosity that was there before. Here's one operator that said, if we didn't need to hide things from management levels, we could finish production so much faster. They realized they were having to hide things, and it really helped them produce faster results when the management was not there. So they wanted to do a phase 3 before we get into this, but they couldn't. They ran out of time. The phase 3 was going to be, okay, now this line had the curtain around it. We're going to take that curtain off of that line and see what happens. They wanted to do that, but they were in like the holiday season, and I think the plant was like, enough with the research study. We've got to make the holiday season numbers. So they weren't able to do that, unfortunately. It would have been interesting to see what happened. I'm going to pause here and see, do we have any questions about the study itself before we talk about how to apply it? Are there any questions in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat. We have a normally querulous group, I'm not sure that's the right word, group. Andrew asks, do you have a link to the study you could share?
I can share it definitely afterwards, yep. It's also in the blog post that this was based on, yes.
And so we should
Okay.
We should publish the URL for the blog post too, Todd.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I have a
right.
question. This is Doug Levitt.
Okay.
How was management, there's some companies where management is perceived as being really good. In this particular company, was there a perception of the management? Or is this just simply an example of another example where management's screwing up?
This is an example where, like with many situations where you have knowledge work. So the people who are closest to the work really know the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. But management actually felt like they could write up the best way to do it, and just kind of make that a standard, right? And so they had good intentions. They were a highly competitive environment, very razor thin margins, but they felt like they could figure out the right way to do it. And maybe they had seen one right way to do it, but it did not handle the variation. And the people closest to the work could innovate the best ways to handle that innovation. But it wasn't really known to management that, they had a very strict kind of procedure to go about getting any new ideas approved. It had to go through this very rigorous process. It was a heavy, hard to change standard. And that caused them to want to hide what they were doing to change it, so they would not have to have confrontation about it, and they wouldn't be slowed down, because they actually had a desire, all the lines, to hit their numbers. They wanted to perform well. They wanted to beat the other lines. There was a healthy competitiveness going on inside the plant. So they felt like they had a purpose, and they actually had the knowledge to do it, but they weren't being allowed to do it unless they did it in private.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Doug. Any other questions on the study?
If I could, I'd make one more comment. I've been on lots of projects where I entered in or was observing after being in the middle, where everyone knows that it's a train wreck ready to happen, but no one says anything because they're scared of the repercussions of what the management will do.
Right.
And I realize it's different in this situation, but it feels similar, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is one thing about the study. So the line, because they weren't being inspected, they knew when they couldn't solve something or when they had a problem, and they would still pull management into the line when that happened. And so it actually ended up creating a healthier environment for the transparency to emerge by giving them privacy to work how they saw fit, and not be under constant watch to see that they're following the standard. And it allowed them to innovate, but it also allowed them to know, guys, we don't know what to do here. And they would pull the management in. And to me, that's healthy. And that could solve kind of what you're talking about. Doug,
yes,
is,
yeah,
because the team is then pulling the management in. Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah, sure. All right, any other questions before we move into this piece?
Just one comment that I didn't say this in introducing Todd, but he has 25 years of consulting with more than 60 Fortune 500 companies, and my own comment about not letting velocity be used as a measure of productivity or performance. It's in those. I think more. The bigger the company, the more you've got this kind of thing. Is it monitoring? Is it helping, or is it surveillance? Question marks.
Yeah, right. And it also begs a question, like who needs to monitor and manage and control? Like, who needs to see it? What do they need to see? And that's really kind of what we get into here in this next piece is, how does this apply to Agile, and how we might be able to use it. All right, I'm going to move forward. So applying it to Agile. There's a cool quote from the 2020 Scrum Guide saying, "Transparency enables inspection, and inspection without transparency is misleading and wasteful." We actually had this in the study, like there was no transparency going on, and it was very wasteful and misleading for managers to come in and kind of make sure they were following the standard, and they weren't getting the transparency. I mean, if they'd seen the transparency of what was so good, then they could use that to say, well, how can we apply that elsewhere? Which ended up happening with the curtain. But yeah, I mean, without, the empirical process breaks down if you don't have transparency. So I think there's kind of three areas, and I do think who needs it is important, who needs the transparency, and what needs to be transparent to the different parties. So I think you've got Agile teams, and this statement, whoever manages the work needs visibility of the work. And we do have self-managing teams when we talk about Agile, self-organizing teams. Management, their role changes a bit. They're no longer kind of controlling, managing the teams and how they're working and what they're working on, and they're not managing anymore. They're kind of flipping that to support the teams, to enable the teams. It's kind of an upside down model where they're supporting the teams now versus managing them. And they kind of need to give the teams privacy to manage their work. And there's also the community. So the organization at large, other teams, other product teams, just in general, like how do we spread this knowledge and across boundaries is important. So yeah, Scrum teams, if you're doing Scrum, they're self-managing. So Scrum Guide says that means they decide who does what, when, and how. And so they manage the work, the team does. So if you look at transparency in Agile teams, they manage the work, so they need visibility of the work, and they need to know, how they're doing it, and they need to. If you look at sprint backlogs, you look at velocity, you look at points. I mean, that's the team's business. I mean, that should be within the curtain. The sprint is like the team's curtain. If you say, okay, you guys manage your work, you manage how you get to your sprint goal. Great. We'll let you do that. We really don't need to know your velocity. You do, because you use it, and you use it to kind of, forecast and plan, but that's your business. And improvement of their process is also their business. Like, how do they innovate to get better? They know best how to do that. These are professionals. They're knowledge workers. They know what is best for the work that they do day in and day out. They are the most capable of doing that. So they own the empirical process of how they improve. And they also should radiate key information about their work. And they do need to, kind of like in the study where they had the whiteboard they put outside the curtain. Yeah, here's some key information that you care about, management. And this is how you measure whether or not we're doing well, we're meeting our outcomes that you desire, and it's out there front and center. And yeah, sure, that is part of the team's responsibility. But when it comes to the work and how they do it and how they innovate to make their life better, I mean, let them do it. And they can ask for help if they need it. If you look at management, they have to support the team and provide them that privacy, that veil of privacy to do their work, to manage their work. This requires them to create some safety for experimentation. And if you say, okay, team, it's yours, do it. If you need help, let me know immediately. But if you don't know what you're doing, let me know. But you got it. I want you guys know best. If you experiment, if it doesn't work, okay. But I want you to try new things. I want you to get better, and just making sure it's safe. And just kind of embracing the red, if you will, and saying, it's okay if you try things and it doesn't work. At least you're learning, and providing safety is key. Also, going to the Gemba, like the real place of work. This is like going to the sprint review or just talking to a team. And there is certain information that management cares about. Like how is the release going? What's your release burn-up look like? Where are you projecting you're gonna finish? What are your obstacles? What are your impediments? What are the things you can't solve that I can help with? And you can get that from going to a key sprint event if you're doing Scrum, or just go talk to the team at the real place of work and just see what's going on firsthand. And then you can see where you can help. I mean, that's really a healthier kind of way for a manager to engage. And if you look at community, how do you share knowledge across team boundaries? Other teams are going to want to learn, what your special sauce is. If you're doing some cool stuff, it's great to share that. And there's a lot of different forums to do it. I've listed a few here. There's probably many others, but I find town halls can be boring if they're one way. I've seen some companies have some really innovative sharing mechanisms in a town hall format where it's kind of like an open space, where you have different kind of breakouts for people to go into and talk about certain topics. It really is great for sharing knowledge and getting everybody involved in that. I've even seen like a science fair type of format where teams are just showing off what they do. So some innovative ways to kind of share knowledge that way. Also, if you have a multi-team product situation where you have multiple teams working on a single product, I found it very beneficial to have those teams have a cross-team retrospective at the end of the sprint. They all finish, they do a sprint review of everything they created together, and then they talk about how they can work better together, how they can share information with each other with this cross-team type of retrospective at the end. I found that really effective. You can also have managers go into their own little retrospective to figure out how they can support the teams better. So there's a lot of different kind of unique ways to use that format too. And then just the enterprise-wide communities of practice. How do you share knowledge across the enterprise and just get stuff out of, out of the curtain and into other kind of curtains for incubation and experimentation, if you will. So basic takeaway here is, wide open transparency can definitely lead to reduced productivity because of the hiding behavior, especially if you don't have a psychologically safe environment. I mean, I think if we get to a psychologically safe environment, then perhaps transparency can be greater, but you really have to have that safety first in order to get there. And I think the curtain might be able to provide, an environment for that safe, kind of healthy transparency to emerge. So it's interesting. Also, just giving team space to and safety to manage the work themselves. How do you give them that space to allow that healthy transparency to emerge? And I think if you can do these things, then that's where you get to that healthy level of engagement with the teams and management and community. All right, any questions now before we kind of do a little lightweight breakout? Or comments?
Hey, Todd, this is Gopal. I'm sorry
Yep.
I missed a few minutes of the initial part of the talk. How do you
No worries.
reconcile a couple of things? One is there is the leadership personality and style.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then the second thing is, the overall culture of the organization as well. I understand completely what you're talking about in terms of the transparency and the psychological safety, no question about that. But there is also the culture, ecosystem, and the leadership style and personality comes into play as well.
Yeah. So, I think, I've had situations where teams have gotten to a point with management where it was adversarial, and you don't want it to get to that. If it does get to that, you can definitely have an open conversation, perhaps with both sides, and then find a way to bring them together and talk about kind of what's going on, how can we create safety for the teams. I find these kind of open dialogues good. I had a situation where I had a team that was struggling because they felt like management was controlling them, and then management on their side, felt like the team, can't be trusted. And, you had this kind of weird dynamic and weird culture. And this was actually part of the culture of this company. It was just the way things were. There wasn't a lot of trust on either side of the game. And I think if you can get in a room with each one and talk about the concerns and then kind of bring them together, sometimes you can work out a way to start a path forward. And, I think you just got to have open dialogue. To change culture, you gotta like get a little transparent with what the problem is, and then start making a little progress to make it better and start building that trust and earning that trust. And sometimes it takes some courage on both parties, some vulnerability. But yeah, I think conversation is the way to kind of start breaking through that if you've got a situation like it.
Yeah, it's easier said than done. That's what I have learned.
Oh, it takes a long time, and one misstep takes you right back, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you know, and you're back at square one. It's a hard journey, but it also takes somebody to help. It also helps if you have like an external, unbiased party to kind of help you through that. Usually, as an Agile coach, I'm coming in external to the company, and I can actually help them with these types of things without being, you know, on either side. But yeah, it's kind of that classic, you know, where do you start with, you know, trust, and, you know, how do you get to transparency if there's no trust? And I mean, I feel like, you know, the best place to start is just start with trust. And let's start from a place of trust. Let's not make people earn the trust. And if you can kind of do that, then maybe that opens the door for doing some of these things we're talking about with transparency. Because if you can't get past the trust thing, then you're shot.
great.
Any other comments on any of this before we do a little breakout stuff or questions? Okay.
Andrew,
You got a question there?
yeah, Andrew has his hand up.
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
I've just pinged a question into chat saying, doesn't this actually point to a much deeper problem with most workplaces than just transparency? That the majority of workplaces, in my experience, are full of people who are basically trying to stay out of trouble. And when you have almost every workplace where managers have been promoted based on a perception of their competence, so they are very invested in continuing to appear competent, you set up the preconditions for the social threat of anyone questioning that competence by coming up with maybe ideas that are counter to the standard way.
Yes.
So transparency on its own absolutely can, if ill-considered, completely backfire on you. Which is, I mean, it's wonderful seeing this study. It actually validates my own substantial experience,
right,
and speaks to actually that really just introducing agility without introducing a completely different way of managing most organizations, such as, I don't know, open book management or some such.
Yep.
That actually sets up some preconditions for trust and management of social threat, then you're whistling in the wind.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And management needs to know that, you know, it's okay to change and get better and improve. And we don't have to follow what got you promoted anymore.
Yeah.
It's okay. And we can try new things. And so it goes all the way kind of up the chain where, you know, there's lack of safety at every level. And that kind of, you know, puts pressure on the team, and it doesn't allow that self-managing team to really blossom.
Yes,
you know,
it's almost like in this world where we're trying to innovate at every point, we've forgotten that innovation will cause change. And yet, you know, us humans aren't terribly good at change. Well, we kind of are, we kind of aren't. It's a complicated thing. Yeah. But yes, there is that feeling, you know, I can't tell you how many places I've worked where people are like, well, that's not the way we do things around here. Well, yes, but today's world isn't yesterday's world. And we kind of did that to ourselves. If you can't keep up, you will go out of business. That's what the market will do to you.
Yeah.
Right.
And that sentiment of that's not the way we do things around here, it freezes the company. Like, it all the way down the chain. It's like, you gotta do what you're told. And so it makes it really hard for teams to do what we want them to do.
Yes.
In this kind of agile lean kind of journey.
Yes.
Yeah. Great comments. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, this is Doug Goldie.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, so my first thought was that this is just another of the age-old battle Ron and I have had about managers when you transform to Agile. But then I realized these guys have implemented Agile without any help. In a guerrilla fashion.
Yes.
I mean, if you think about it, management's oblivious. We change the way we work. It's like a prisoner of war camp where they change working when the guard comes around or something. Anyway, so this sounds very deja vu. Most of the enterprise-y kind of enterprises that we've transformed to Agile or done innovation projects at, they were doing basically waterfall before, right? Everybody was doing waterfall. And when they transition, that means they have managers. Often they have managers who don't code, and they have architects, and sometimes the architects have architects. And now you're going to transform, and those guys, their job goes away technically. And so often they don't let it go away. They start tweaking things in secret. Now that didn't happen at this case, right? Management wasn't really implementing new policies, right? The teams were self-organizing and not telling the managers. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Exactly.
I can't think of any company that we've seen in software where people were smart enough to do this without telling the managers. I mean, I've seen it plenty the other way, where they do Agile in name only. And I used to call it the Borg. They assimilate. They're still doing their same stuff. They're still architecting and divvying up things, but they, so I don't know what to take of this. This feels very deja vu. It feels like the same thing all over again, except that these guys were smart enough on their own.
Right.
I don't know. Ron, since I mentioned,
I have seen hiding behavior in teams. You'll see this with take velocity, right? If I know that management's looking at it, there's gaming of that metric all over the place. People inflate estimates to make the number look. I mean, there's definitely hiding there, right? Yeah.
I think we saw, Doug, I think I saw this at Apple when I was at Apple, way before Agile. And it wasn't the teams becoming Agile, but it was the teams, self-organizing to be wonderful, because that was to make Apple's mission was we're going to change the world, and teams intended to do that.
Yeah. Purpose may have something to do with, how teams might self-organize and do it without management knowing too. Like it was almost like these lines had drive, in this plant. Like they were very driven to meet their numbers. They had, this kind of healthy competition going on between the other lines. They did feel like they had a purpose, and they were trying to do their job well. So that had something to do with maybe some of this behavior. Sometimes a lot of teams we have, if they are coming from that command and control environment, their purpose is to do their widget or their one piece of the puzzle, and that maybe that's not very inspiring.
Did this management team not try to change things ever?
They were like completely surprised by this entire study. They thought they knew what was going on. They had no idea that the hiding was happening. I mean, they just didn't realize it was going on. They were completely surprised.
Do you think they were issuing directives to change this and that, and the team ignored them because they knew what the right thing to do was? I mean, the manager must be doing something.
Yeah. I mean, that came in the form of these standards. I mean, they would update the standards when improvements were made, but the teams knew that the standards just didn't always work. Everything did not go perfectly all the time. and they knew how to get around it.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for something that validated what I'm seeing for so long. That was an actual research study, and yeah, so I thought it was really cool. He did say that, you know, there are cultural. He said it would also be good to run the study, you know, outside of like China, maybe, you know, in the West, because there are some cultural differences that may lead to some of this. But he also felt like a lot of the stuff that is seen here, he said there are other studies that show that it happens in other companies too. And there's a lot of evidence that whatever he saw in this plant is very applicable to other workplaces. And I mean, my experience, I mean, I've definitely seen it. And it's not in, I don't work in China companies. So.
Hey, Todd, there is a question on the chat, by the way.
Oh, there is. Hold on.
It's from Michael. The question is, so can a team be underperforming? How much space do you give them to address that?
Oh, okay. So there's definitely a question of capability. Like if, and you'll find also when teams are first going to Agile, if they're from a command and control structure, they're used to being told everything. They've never made many decisions on their own. Separate people design, you know, what they need to build, and they just have to go follow the recipe. And when you make the switch over into an Agile way of working, you do need to provide teams with the support they need to learn, kind of, and you know it's okay to actually, you know, try to solve problems on their own. And they have to build that muscle. It's like, it's probably, you know, regressed for all the time they haven't been making any decisions on their own. And they have to be, you know, kind of encouraged and kind of coached along that journey to find that problem solving behavior and build that muscle, I think. So yeah, they may not have the capability from the beginning, and you may have to provide them the support in order to get that. And I don't know if I answered that question, Mike, but that's kind of what first came to my mind.
I'm curious to Doug Goldie's question, and so I named, but didn't give the example, but I named Apple as a place that I'd seen that the people in programming teams optimizing and not necessarily telling their management and just making it happen. Have other people seen that?
Oh yes.
And can you
Oh
give
yes.
for that, Andrew? Yeah. So
yes.
I thought so. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, I can give examples in both directions. I won't throw this particular enormous fintech company under the bus, but you can figure it out. Year one of their Agile transformation, everybody got trained, and some totally got it. I just got on and did a much better job. They were typically the ones who had managers who left them alone. Year two, after getting a whole bunch of metrics out at the end of year one that the transformation group could show to the organizational leadership, like idiots, they promised that those metrics would go up. They didn't understand that they're an indication of the actual capacity of the organization. And when it became clear that those metrics weren't going up, the command went out to the 25 Agile coaches to go and get those metrics up. Otherwise, nobody was getting their bonuses and our badges might stop working. And so we went out and taught everybody how to use Jira, how to game metrics so that they appeared to go up. Competent teams started using smaller story points. Some teams started only pointing one story and making sure they completed that one, so their say-do ratio was perfect. All kinds of dysfunction. And I have to say, still the ones that were the most functional were the ones who basically went, "Oh, shut off and leave us alone. We're just doing great work here and we know we're doing it."
No.
Typically,
So
they
a
had
curtain.
managers who had been in that world and were like, "No, we totally get it. Anything you guys need?" And they were the ones who actually understood that when you provide people with what they need and get them clear on what's important, guess what? They'll go and do the important stuff.
That's
so
right.
simple. It's so simple. But the irony of all of that was the next year, they most of that leadership group left anyhow, and they fired the 25 coaches come what may. Oh well.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also some story here about, a lot of companies, the stuff they want to manage is the output metrics. It's like,
Yes.
How much throughput, how much more can you produce? And they're not really thinking about the value and helping the team have a purpose, a meaningful, purposeful goal that provides an outcome to a customer. Like, to me, that would be better for management to work with teams to make them have a purpose and, give them the space to achieve that in the best way they see fit, and help them, if they don't have the capability, to get the capability they need to do it.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite questions when I'm starting up an engagement is to ask almost everybody, tell me, can you express the value of the work that you're doing? And I don't mean in dollars. Because almost nobody has a really clear sense of the actual, bang for the buck of what they're up to, with the possible exception of people in sales or customer support.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, small wonder that the guy down on the production line, as it were, is really just trying to stay out of trouble and get paid.
Whereas I think at Apple, everyone had a visceral feeling of contributing to the impact.
Yeah, they felt like they were the founders, even if they weren't actual founders. They identified with the mission. That's fantastic when you get that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to make this like too much work, but I think it would be interesting to do a little brainstorming with the people that are here and share. I was thinking we could probably just do 2 or 3 breakouts with the people we got. Just have small group discussion. I was thinking that, the theme is, how can we apply what we just heard to our organizations? Like, how could we, create a safe space for teams, and what are some of the things, we'd want to stop doing, and, what are some things we could start doing to enable some of this stuff? So if you guys are up for it, we could just maybe split into 3 breakouts, and I've got a little kind of area down here. Each room could just kind of put their ideas on and have a discussion about it. You can do it lean coffee or just talk, whatever you want to do. So, so we could just break out for maybe 10-15 minutes and then come back and share out. What do you guys think?
Let's do that.
All right. Very good. So I'm going to try to do the breakouts. All right, I'm going to send you guys out.
Nice fucker.
We got everyone back? Maybe, maybe not.
I don't think we got people back
Oh,
yet.
they're closing in 30 seconds. We'll see them in a minute.
Yeah, now they're back.
All right. So I'll tell you what, I was thinking we could just go to each breakout and have them share kind of some of the highlights of the discussion that you guys had about how to apply these insights to the organizations we work in, and kind of what you guys talked about. So we can go to room 1 first. I think that was Bryn, Duggett, Gopal, and Sarisha. You guys want to share what you talked about with the group? Are you there?
Yep. I was just waiting for the others to chime in. Brian or Doug or Sirisha, do you guys want to go?
Sure, leading with courage. So we talked about establishing trust 2 ways, and really how important it is for not just the team to earn trust, but for managers to be actively making space for that trust as well. And the need for teams to really be communicating when they are going to take those leaps and risks, where they will need their manager's support if something falls off the rails or goes wrong. And I'll leave some open space for others to chime into.
This is Doug. I think you summarized that extremely well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Doug.
Agreed.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
What was it? What do you got this one sticky that says, "Don't do anything to lose the trust." What was what was the conversation around that?
We found other people were posting in room 1.
Yeah,
That
actually,
wasn't
this
yours.
is Mona talking. Yeah, I would like to apologize. I just did a mistake. I didn't understand where should I write my sticky note, and I started to write it here, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
They told me
No,
that.
actually, that was a discussion we had, Doug, where we were talking about, an established team that is already there, and there is a certain amount of trust from management. You don't want to, put yourself in a position as a team or as an individual where you do something where management starts to mistrust you. So this is about, you're consistently delivering, and then you stop delivering and you're not able to, ask for help or anything like that. So that was the conversation we had, Doug, if you remember.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did remember. I was just commenting that there was a lot of stickies filled in on room 1 that we didn't fill in.
I did. I was
Oh,
typing
you did.
it
I'm
in.
sorry. I apologize. Okay, I apologize. I
That's
think,
awesome.
yeah, one other thing that during our discussion that came to my mind is, so you do this snap, and you have this agile transformation, and all of a sudden you form all these teams or squads or whatever you want to call them. And again, I do think that this thing about trust and transparency is a 2-way street, because I think the teams need to earn the trust of the management as well, because if they do that, then there will be that 2-way trust. And then how do you establish that? And many of the individual teams that I've been on, we've been able to establish that 2-way trust, but how do you do that at scale is something that has been running through my mind. Some of the comments that people mentioned, deliver what you say, deliver value, but how do you do that? And I guess that's what the teams need to do, is start off from day one, sprint one, starting to do that, and then that will deliver that trust.
And what happens when you kind of mess up too, and how does that build the trust up or tear it down as well, even further?
Mona was raising her hand to.
Yeah, I would like to say something. Actually, it's true we have to have this both side trust, but I believe that we need to give the team also time. We cannot expect from the sprint one everything can happen perfectly great. No, it's not going to happen. Team needs time. That time needs to be given, and this trust is going to build step by step. It's not something it can happen, and we should just have it by default. And then, yeah, after sometimes I don't know, after 6 months we see things are not going well. Yeah, it's not going to happen better. So, but at least, I mean, I just say 6 months or 3 months, but we need to give the team time. I don't know if you want to stay in the room number 1, but I can just discuss about room number 2 that we were discussing, if my team is agree.
Can I just jump in? I wasn't in room 1, but I would like to comment. I think, if a team consistently delivers and they fail, I think that's a pivotal moment for management. Like how they behave, that's where you build the trust. If you go down hard on that team and start taking things away, you build a very low trust environment, and the safety is gone. So that's where management needs to step up.
Yeah.
Excellent points, Mona and Martin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Martin.
Okay. So Mona, you were saying room 2, you wanted to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, for instance, if I saw room 1 also discuss it, it's like, do not do anything to lose the trust. I think one of the things that's very important is act. When we have a retro and we take the action items, if we do not act on it, if we don't consider what should happen, okay? If we don't take it to consideration, we will lose that trust between the team and manager or Scrum Master or Agile Coach or whoever it is. So one of the area that I saw it that failed within the company, to my experience, it was that area. The manager didn't want even have to have a retro because they were thinking it's not needed, it's just lose our productivity time.
Yeah.
Great.
They see it as a cost, not an investment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because of many other things, because of, I don't know, the estimation was hours or whatever, there was not built based on real value. Let's say that. If you don't mind, could you please just move on to room number 2? That would be easier.
Yes.
Another thing is listening. I think the people, the team, everybody in a team are the best people who can indicate us what they need for the psychological safety. You can ask them the question and they can help us to learn from them. Like, okay, how do you feel better? Because everybody has a different personality, different way of living. So we need to listen to them and then we can understand what they need. Another thing that I think is important is empowering the team, respecting the different opinion. I don't mean to have a democracy and do all of the opinion, right? No, but respect everybody's opinion, because everybody's opinion matter. And maybe it can help us. Maybe they have different ideas that we never had it in our mind, or the management needs to listen to that and at least to understand what they're talking about.
You don't really want harmony. You want constructive conflict.
Exactly.
to get to better outcomes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So those actually can help the team to feel like, okay, their opinions matter. Their voice can be heard. Like someone can listen to their voice. And I think they can work like easier with each other and with manager. They will be like kind of understanding in both sides. And also, I can see here someone write, I think that's not my opinion, but I think it's Martin that you write it down off topic. Outward transparency. What's that one?
No, we don't need to go into that. That's a completely different topic that we can talk
Okay.
about some other day. It goes into like beyond budgeting and how do we do transparency and how decisions are made, hiring, all those things, salaries, completely different thing.
Oh, right.
But very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, that was an area that we were have discussed, and also something Martin added, focus on outcome rather than output. I think that's something that was important. That is important.
What's happening? It's like I can't hear anything.
It's not me.
All right, good.
Yeah, that was from room 2. Yeah.
Group have any questions about that or any other comments?
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw out something I came across on LinkedIn the other day, kind of falls into that listening to the team. And what it was is the Scrum Master had been introduced to a new team, and one of the first things they had done was send out a survey asking for their team's preferred methods of communication, whether they loved in-person meetings or they wanted one-on-ones or they preferred to have positive or negative feedback through email or phone call, and did that for the team. They went on something I'd never seen before, brand new, and I just thought that is a brilliant, concrete way to get immediate feedback from your team, just starting off to say, I'm listening to you and I can adapt how I'm working with you to make sure that your needs are being met.
Pretty awesome. Do your teams normally come up with like, what are our working agreements? What are our norms? Like, what is our team charter? What's our purpose? Has anyone ever done that?
Yeah, absolutely, but maybe not to the extent they do it in the team format. And okay, we've come to a consensus. We all agree we're going to go with this, and hasn't necessarily had that one-on-one feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see where that would be valuable. That's cool. Any other comments on what group 2 talked about or thoughts? All right, cool. So group 3. This is Ron and Denny and Andrew. I was in there a little bit. You guys want to share what you discussed?
Do you want to kick us off?
Who kick us off?
You.
Actually, have Denny kick us off. Denny had a really
actually, yes, that's very true.
Denny kicked us off in our conversation by noting that transparency is not the only myth to be busted.
Yeah, the other one that I was talking about was meritocracy. It was kind of in response to Andrew's conversation earlier about promoting via competence, but meritocracy in general can lead to some of the dysfunction that is around. It's sort of another perspective on transparency as an issue. Meritocracy in its own way can, if you're measuring the wrong things for what counts as merit.
What was that fantastic quote of yours, Ron, about measurement?
Yeah.
Oh, what gets measured gets manipulated.
There you go. What else? We spoke a little bit about cultural things such as Frederick Laloux, Reinventing Organizations, the ideal of the teal organization, which is effectively a kind of manager-less.
And the
What
value,
else did we talk about?
the value of ideals.
The value of ideals. Yes,
Value of
absolutely.
ideals. Yep.
Yes, it may be ideal and people dismiss it for like, well, that's an ideal. But what would it be like if we didn't have ideals? Great merciful heavens. We mentioned briefly the first line of the Agile Manifesto. Well, I did. I can't help but mention it. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. And if you take that one sentence apart, everything is in there. We,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, it's collective. We're doing it in the present all the time, you know. I just keep going, looking at it like that. It's such a perfect guide for us.
Yeah.
So one of the things, the reason that our thing there is blank is because we were basically doing more general conversations around the whole issue rather than looking for specific ways to do this better.
Yeah.
There's
bunch of
rich
good book
discussion in that room.
recommendations.
Yeah.
Ron was about to jump in, I think.
Yeah, well, I had a thought, and we didn't really talk about, but I wonder, you know, kind of to the whole, you know, the curtains analogy, in the sense that now that we have a lot of remote teams and they kind of work on their own, and you know, this idea that this actually kind of creates that curtain in a way that, you know, in other places, you know, you just like before, you could see all the teams across the floor and see them working, but now they're off in their own spaces. So this, yeah.
I've also seen this cause a reaction in management to like get more like visibility into what's going on. Some of the companies I'm working with, like they're just pushing to get everything in Azure DevOps, so management can just see what's going on, because they have no other way. They can't just walk around anymore and see what's going on. So yeah, and that's causing a little bit of this weirdness too. It's kind of trying to remove the curtain that's there with being remote.
That's kind of the point, isn't it? I mean, show me that warehouse full of code that is our inventory. It doesn't work like that. You know, software is inherently invisible. So unless you find a way of representing it in some form of visibility, then it gets very difficult to know what's going on. I think management has, no, let me back up a little bit. Agile came about because some really smart people realized that they were developing an industry that is full of stuff that nobody has ever done before. And yet we still work within an economy where organizations have to make promises to the market as if they can make a promise. So it's like the senior management is going, we've got to be able to hit this target. And our poor old engineers are going, we've never done this before. And you're trying to tell me I've got to perform? What? And hence Agile going, look, let's do tiny bits of things so we can keep steering towards something that would actually look a little bit like meeting that promise. You know, then if you actually promote people into a position where they now have been rewarded for apparently knowing what they're doing, it just makes the problem worse, you know. Sorry, I'm getting onto one of my things, but
no, it's all good.
What else did we cover in our conversation?
I think we probably covered the output and outcome question.
Yeah.
The manipulation of metrics and the danger of measuring the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, measuring story points is meaningless unless you actually have some measure of value, whatever that means in the context of, you know, what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just keeping people busy. And, you know, that's one of the traps of the most successful organizations, is that they're actually making a ton of money whilst busy internally improving things that don't make a blind bit of difference.
The other pointer that we did that other people might be interested in is Shape Up. That's the Shape Up
yes.
from Basecamp.
Yes.
Andrew put this at Shape Up as another way to look at the world.
And the shape up comes from the Basecamp guys, and they declare in the big so you can get a free download of Shape Up. It's a small 6-week projects. Deliver them, then take 2 weeks and refactor or refresh or do that kind of thing. And they in the Basecamp case said, no, this is not Agile. And but you go read through it, and it's pretty Agile.
I'm just throwing the copy of it up into chat because while we were talking, I found it and downloaded it. It's free on Basecamp's site. So there you go. There you go. It's in chat right now.
Awesome. Is there anything unique in their approach that addresses what we're talking about, like with transparency and self-managing teams? Is it anything unique in the Shape Up?
Yeah, I think the goal is give the team a really well-bounded, a really well-shaped, let's shape up, a really well-shaped set of requirements. So a really well-shaped objective goal.
Okay.
And then let the team go for it. And then let the team go for it. And the team may or may not go in exactly the direction that you thought you were going in when you shaped it. But the team is targeted, and I think there's the back off and let them do it, and you know, that's a short enough period that we can stop that we can feel okay about not watching. So I think so.
It's small.
Yeah.
Right.
There are some dramatic differences.
Right, but it's longer than 2 weeks, and 2 weeks is not long enough to actually deliver something. Sometimes it is, but too often it's not.
I think doing small things is important when you're trying to build trust, right? And you know, the blast radius of a failure is not very large. It's easier to trust, you know, to have some courage to go down that trust route. I think there's a lot of goodness in small things when it comes to that.
Well, I noticed that we even use the word failure. If you're actually working on something that nobody's worked on before, it's an experiment, and it may take you as long to find out what doesn't work as it does to find out what does work. So if you can actually reframe it from going, this wasn't a failure, this was data. Because after all, if you're doing something really innovative, you might be trying to move into a market that actually it turns out it doesn't exist. Right? You're doing something brand spanking new, you put it out there, nobody actually cares. Well, is that failure? No, that's just what's going on in the market. You know, it's data. Right?
True.
So much of this depends upon the use of language.
Yes.
And how people interpret. Everybody
Yes.
has a different interpretation sometimes, right?
Yes, you can have a lot of fun with knowing what you know that you said was what you meant, but what they heard was not what they heard. It was what somebody else told them that they'd heard that they didn't mean, and you meant something else completely different. And and now go and get on with it. Otherwise, I'll consider you to be a failure. I could keep that going all day. Don't encourage me.
I want that one written down.
Oh, really?
All right, good. Any other kind of comments or areas of discussion before I guess we're getting close to wrapping up? Any closing thoughts? All right, cool. Well, this has been great discussion. I'm glad we did the breakouts. I definitely learned a few things. What do you guys think in general about this format? Was this a good format to kind of have the presentation followed up with discussion? Do you guys typically do these things this way?
Yeah, we do them all different, all different.
Yeah.
and we collaborate with you presenters to say, what do you think is going to work?
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, Todd, I think the breakout session was really good. As Ron said, we have done different things. There was one presenter who actually had a game similar to the Jeopardy game. And you basically, they throw in some questions and there is a music going in the background and you answer the questions, things like that. We had some fun with that as well. But this is a great format, especially using a collaborative tool like Miro or Mural.
Yeah, you can choose 20, 40, 60, 80, or $100 question out of the Scrum column.
Yep. Yeah, that's really cool.
Or
I like that.
Answer, actually. Then you have to come up with a question. It's Jeopardy.
Yeah, that's good. Well, cool. I really appreciate you guys having me. I've enjoyed spending time with you guys tonight and talking through this stuff. I think it's important. It's something that, as long as I've been in this business of being an Agile coach, I run into this. So I think the more we can talk about it and come up with solutions, the better.
So and thank you so much for sharing what you've learned in the study you came across, Todd. So big applause.
Thank you very much.
So, hey, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I think the operative word I've heard many, many times is trust and the human connection. And I heard that so many times. It's pretty cool. At the same time, I heard, challenges and obstruction to trust and to the ability to move forward with what we want to do and what our ideals are. So this is, to me, very interesting, and I learned a lot. So I want to thank Todd. I want to thank Ron for bringing us this to us. And we're going to continue to learn. That's what we do, learn, and then hopefully we can apply to our real lives. So thank you, Todd, very much.
Thank you for having me.
And we should note that Todd is in Virginia, so he has stayed up very late to share. So thank you.
I'm a night owl. Sure, yeah, no problem. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, everyone. So again, this is recorded. We're going to send it out, and I'm notoriously late about doing that. But we're going to send it out, and everyone can go to the YouTube site and see all of our recordings. I don't know, we have like 20 or 30 now out there. And Todd, you'll be another one, important one.
Awesome.
Cool. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you everyone for participating and sharing your thoughts, ideas, and cognitive beings on this broadcast, really, at this juncture. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to end
Hey, Jay, do you want to talk a minute about the upcoming things for next month?
No, yeah, go Paul, go ahead. Tell us what's coming up.
So we have great things planned for the next couple of months as well. Next month, we are going to have 2 presentations, one about Spotify, experience from Spotify Coach, somebody who has been there in Spotify for about 3 years. Ron was able to get that presenter, and we are lucky to have him.
That sounds cool.
Yeah,
Kevin Goldsmith, who was the VP of Engineering at VP of Engineering for commercial for the retail part of Spotify, while Henry Nieberg was setting up the Spotify model. And so from an executive standpoint, being part of that evolution of that model, what has Kevin taken away? And so he's been CTO at 3 companies since then. What did he take away from that? What is he still using? What's important as one of the people who modeled it?
Yeah, and I just saw somebody, Martin, you were part of Spotify as well. Maybe, this is also an invitation. If you want to do a presentation, we are always open. So please consider that, Martin, in terms of your experience. The other thing that we are going to do is about Agile HR. So that's going to be another one of the big topics these days. So that's coming up next month. And then we are also looking at, in July, Agile games and other things that are coming up that's in the pipeline as well. So wanted to mention these things. Those things we have a few things lined up already.
Yeah, thanks, GoPaul.
Hope you guys won't mind if I join you for some of that. That sounds really good.
No.
Yeah, please.
Please do.
So again, thank you, everyone. More to come. This is going to be forever. It's a life journey. So stay tuned. Thank you. Good night.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.